Hi there, I'm Eric Wordweaver Sjerven, Gothi of the Ridgar folk here in East Texas, and I'd like to welcome you to the Raven's Call. This is where I ramble on about different heathen-related subjects, just whatever catches my eye at the time. So, before we get started, let's take care of some of the nitty-gritty. If you like these videos and you like what I do, please hit like down below. It really does help in getting these things out in front of other people. It helps to kind of share things around. So if you think that people might be of benefit from the information that's in these videos, then please hit like, share them around, let people see them. Similarly, hit subscribe, ding the bell. The more subscriptions and interactions we get, the more it gets in front of people. Got all my contact information down below. Things should be slowing down here in the near future, so I'm hopefully going to be able to stay up on those contacts a little bit better. I've discovered that as more and more contacts come in, it becomes more and more difficult for me to reply to them in a reasonable amount of time, and that's because you guys ask great questions. You ask very intelligent questions that deserve detailed answers, and sometimes more than what I can give in like a 30-second, hey, I'm checking my email kind of thing. Sometimes I need to spend a little bit of time in front of the keyboard to craft a response that's appropriate to what you're actually asking, to give respect to the reply. So bear with me on those, okay? I will reply. I get around to it. It may take me a little bit, but that's because I don't want to just sit down and just throw something at the keyboard and then, kind of half-ass cover it and maybe never come back to it. I'd rather go ahead and give it the attention it's due and, see things through. So anyway, onwards. Today's show is going to be, it's not really a viewer request, but it is spawned from some stuff that I've seen with the viewers. And today's subject is going to be patron deities, okay? Because I've had people ask me in the comments on YouTube and on Facebook, some of the emails, what my take on patron deities are, or what my patron deity is, things like that. And I have an interesting view when it comes to patron deities, and it does not jive with kind of the general neo-pagan view. So I'm not going to sugarcoat it. I'm just going to jump into it. I'm not a big fan of the concept of patron deities, okay? I get that from a Romanesque approach, the idea of patron deities within the Roman gods, the Greek gods, as you were tied to a specific god kind of thing, like this king was tied specifically to Zeus. Even then, those tended to be, if you look at the patron deities, they tended to be for cities, like Athena was the patron deity of Athens, things like that, and for like royalty and higher ups. You didn't find a whole lot of individuals that really honestly felt like that god or goddess watched over their home in particular. But even then, that's the Romans, it's not the heathens in general. Things don't work out quite the same. Being a true polytheist, a hard polytheist, as far as the way I define them, go back and watch my previous videos to get my definitions. It just means that I believe all of the gods are their own individual entities and not some aspects of a greater god. And I'm not like soft polytheism or monotheistic, all that. I believe each of the gods is their own identity and entity. Okay? So, all of that being said, when it comes to patron deities, I don't feel like that really jives with the way the mechanics with our gods actually works. And part of that, I think, comes from the fact that I am more tribal-oriented in the way that I look at things. I think of our interactions with the gods largely being on a tribal base. It's like the relationship between Ridgar, my tribe, and the gods. And we maintain that through ritual and through festival and doing all of the, upholding the traditions, so that we maintain those relationships. We exchange in the gift cycle, things like that. And it's from a very tribal-oriented kind of thing. Do I believe that it's possible to interact with the gods on an individual basis? Yeah, I do. I think that they pay more attention to larger groups than they do necessarily the individual, but it's definitely possible. You just have to be particularly worthy of their attention to get their attention on a microcosmic level. So, here's the thing about patron deities, okay? I do not think that, because if I were to boil it all down, I would say that I'm an Odinsman, okay? And I know a lot of people that will call themselves Heimdallsman or Heimdallsman, Tiersman, Freursman, Here, the way that I look at it is this. That's about our own psychological needs, our own identities and identifiers, not about which God actually pays attention to us, not about which God has chosen us. Because I feel like the gods themselves as a tribe call to us, as a tribe pull us to them, but we are naturally going to be drawn to one or more of the gods in particular because we identify with them. We see elements of ourselves in them, and that's where I see patron deities coming into effect. It's not that a person is particularly favored by this god, it is that a person particularly favors this god. That's how I see patron deities in actuality playing out. I am an Odinsman not because I feel like Odin picks me out and pays particular attention to me. No. I'm an Odinsman because of all the gods. I see myself being most close in mentality and traits to Odin, and I seek his path to kind of further expand my knowledge and my wisdom. So, yes, after fashion, I do support the idea of, not necessarily patron deities, but favored deities. That's perfectly in keeping. It's understandable. We would do that with each other. I mean, you've got a large group of people, so you got 20 people in a room that, have been going to school together for the last 12 years. Naturally speaking, yeah, you all know each other. You all got relationships, but there's 2 or 3 in there that you're really tight with. And that's kind of how I see this. If you go to see a show, like a band, okay, you go see a band all the time. Giving adulations and adoration to the band. There's a couple of members that you probably like more so than the other members. It's not that you dislike the other members, but you're more drawn to them. They're the face of the band for you, as it were. The gods are similar, and that's from a base human standpoint. That's not from a relationship with the gods standpoint. That's from a base human psychological element of we look for familiarity in trait and characteristic. So, it's rambling and it's kind of roundabout, but what it all comes back to is that what I see as the patron deity movement in modern heathenry is grown out of a neo-pagan pull, which does not recognize that psychological need. They feel the pull between them and a particular god or goddess, and they think it is that particular god or goddess calling to them or choosing them, as opposed to the fact that they are choosing that particular god or goddess. They're mistaking where the impetus is, where the originating energy comes from, where the decision is being made. So the idea of patron deities coming and being over you, it's not really how it works. I maintain a relationship with all of the Aesir because that is the tribe of the gods, and I'm trying to stay good with the tribe of the gods because we seek to reap their benefits as a whole. On a personal level, yes, I do identify more with Odin, and in some ways, because I identify more with Odin, I find it easier to contact Odin because I understand him better than I do some of the other gods. But that doesn't mean I stop trying to understand the other gods in the same, try to catch them up to my understanding of Odin. But part of the reason I understand Odin is because I see elements of Odin in myself, and so there's a commonality there that I get pulled to. So we will frequently utilize patron deities to humanize them to a certain extent, because someone who chooses a patron deity is frequently choosing, if I were to play any one of the gods, this is the one I would play. If they were to cast a television show and of all of humanity, I was given the chance to play one of the gods, the one that I would most likely play because it is closest to me is this one. So that's kind of how I see patron deities. Now, that's not to disrespect the concept of patron deities, just simply to say, hey, let's pull back and actually take a look at the concept and what's really going on here. Because there's a lot to learn from that, understanding that there's a reason you're pulled to that god or goddess. There's a reason that you naturally feel that connection, and then you can capitalize on that. All right? There's no benefit in walking through thinking that you are Frere's chosen child simply because of, he showed up to you in a dream or something like that. However, if you recognize the similarities and commonalities between you and Frere, and you begin to understand that you are pulled to Frere because of these, and you understand the connection between each other, then you can begin to understand how better to contact Frere and how to better build relationship with him. And thusly, by building better relationship with him, he can be your in-man to the rest of the tribe of the gods, and therefore build a stronger relationship with the whole of the gods as a result. So it's tribal. That's just how tribe works. If you were to try and befriend my tribe, more than likely you're going to befriend an individual within my tribe first, and then utilize them to build a connection to the rest of the tribe, and then boom, tribes are tied together, friends. It's just naturally how it happens, and it's not like it's, that makes it sound particularly Machiavellian and manipulative. However, that's naturally, organically how it happens. And tribes end up friends with one another because two members happen to find each other and end up becoming friends, and then by proxy, the tribes begin to interact, and they become friends as a result. So that's very similar to the idea of patron deities. Now, so when I see this pop up online, I don't frequently weigh in, okay? Because like most things, as you can see, my viewpoints are kind of complicated and not necessarily easily and simplistically put down into easily digestible format. Because I get a lot of people who are like, I'm a Heimdallsman, I'm an Odinsman, and they don't really get it, And then to sit here and try to explain to someone who's got more of a neo-pagan bent on how patron deities work, they don't get the concept of gods of limited access, and so they think being their patron god, that their god is always watching them and always there with them, etc., 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 etc. And that gets a little frustrating because I can't break through the concept of gods of limited access to begin with, let alone trying to explain that, you feel an affinity to that god, not necessarily that god has chosen you. Not that I can speak whether or not the gods have chosen anyone in particular, but I can say that with all of the individuals that I've met in the world, if every single person who's come up to me and said I was chosen by Odin or Freya was actually chosen by Odin and Freya, their judgment is becoming somewhat questionable, because those numbers are staggering. So, we choose them. That's the thing. Sometimes the gods will call out to us. Sometimes the gods will choose us for things. But those are going to be rare exceptions. In the grand scheme of things, the gods operate on sacred time, not on mortal time like we do. So the frequency with which they would need to choose a human for something particular is going to be very, very remote as far as, with relation to how we perceive time. And then even then, they're going to choose the outstanding individuals, those that are particularly well-suited. The legendary berserker, the young prince who will one day be king, the young maid who's learning magic who will one day be a great sorceress, kind of thing. Those kind of characters are the ones that get chosen by the gods for specific purposes. So, it's okay to acknowledge the fact that the concept of patron deities is us answering our own internal call, our own internal need to go back to the gods, to go back to the old ways, and recognize that it comes from us. It comes from the inside. It's not a given thing that, that has to come from the gods to be justified. It's okay to acknowledge that the reason you want to go back to the gods is because you feel the pull inside you. And that's your soul that's screaming out to reconnect to the wild, to reconnect to the old ways, to reconnect with the gods and goddesses. And that's fine. You don't have to be chosen by the gods to come home. You just simply have to go, I want to go home. I want to go back, and I want to build a connection with the gods. I want to build a connection with the Vatir. I want to build a connection with my ancestors. And boom, you're good to go. It's all the justification you need. I always maintain that because I want to is a valid reason. It's not always a good reason, but because I wanted to is a valid reason. It's honest to be able to say, why did you do that? Because I wanted to. Okay, why did you eat that pizza? Because I wanted to. Okay, it's a valid reason. And in that instance, it's a good reason. Why did you, drive your truck off the interstate into a tree? Well, because I wanted to. Valid reason, not a good one. So, conceptually speaking, why did you go back to the gods? Because I wanted to. Valid reason and a good reason. It's fine. Because I felt the call within me to go back to the gods and found my way home. I wanted that. That's perfectly fine. It doesn't have to be that the gods have called you to come home. The gods are there like a beacon, shining all the time. We recognize the light and decide we want to go there. And that's why we go home to the gods. They continue to shine. They continue to be there, stalwart and sacred, existing as a beacon throughout time and space. And the heathens of the world are beginning to open their eyes and look up and see the gods in their glory and feel the call to come home. It's like the lighthouse in the distance. We see it, and that's where we want to go. It's that hope in the dark, that pull back. And it doesn't necessarily, and I know this seems like I'm going way left field, but this all boils down to the patron deity thing because, a lot of people in the patron deity element feel that they have been chosen by this particular god or goddess. And that's not how I see it happening. We choose, and we choose because we feel the pull towards the beacon. Now, different element to patron deities is that a lot of people, especially newbies, will come to me and say, I don't know who my patron deity is. I don't know who is called to me or who I should choose. You don't have to choose anybody. You don't have to have a patron deity. There's nothing that says you have to have a patron deity. The closest thing that you're going to find to actual historical support for patron deities are going to be in class system elements, such as Thor is the god of the working man, Odin is the god of the ruling class, priest class, etc., etc., etc. But the house god, Kofgod, the husvetir, the house wights, house spirits, that is the closest thing you're going to come to patron deities. That and specific ancestral deities that are tied to specific family lines. Those are where you end up with patron deities. There's the story of, I can't remember which saga it is off the top of my head because I'm just coming up with this on the fly. But this battling kings, and one of the kings summons a couple of goddesses that were specific to his family during combat and turns their evil magics against his opponents. That's a patron deity example. You look to the housewives, the husvetir, that are blessing the home and protecting the home and things like that. That's a localized patron deity. That's very much specifically tied to you and your family on a personal level. So those wonderful examples of patron deities. So if I was going to say who is my patron deity, I would say it was my housewife, most likely. So which of the gods do I most see as similar to myself, or who do I see myself most in the gods? Would be Odin, just simply because that's the one to whom I feel the most draw and who I see the most commonalities. Does that mean that Odin gives me any more time a day than anybody else? Nope. No, not even close. I work at it. I work to get that relationship and to get that tie and that gift exchange and everything, but it does not necessarily mean that I'm entitled to anything. So that's kind of where I go left on patron deities, is because I feel like patron deities, as it's described and is most frequently referenced in the newbie forums and things like that, I feel like it's out of context. I feel like people are trying to apply a Romanesque idea that has been filtered through a Wiccan veneer onto heathenry, and then it doesn't really apply. Not like that anyway. Yes, we see farmers and things like that wearing Thor's hammers, and you could say, well, Thor's their patron deity. I'm like, well, no, they were calling to Thor for protection. That doesn't mean they didn't call to Freyr for fecundity and whatnot. Plus, there's the whole regionalization thing. I mean, if you look at different areas and regions within heathenry in Arch-heathen times, which spans hundreds of years, I mean, you've got tons of disparity between early heathenry, late heathenry, conversion heathenry, all of that. There's a lot of differences on who is worshipped where and when, and what the relationship is. At one point in time, Tyr was seen as higher than Odin, and Odin takes over. It can get pretty complicated, especially when you consider that it ranged everywhere from Northern Europe all the way into the mainland. So you get everything from Norse Scandinavian heathenry all the way over to Germanic heathenry with Anglo-Saxon heathenry. And then you got the Finnish that are their own completely different thing. It gets complicated really fast. And you'll find that there were probably some gods and goddesses that we're seeing maybe as patrons of specific areas, more in that Romanesque element of, like Athena and Athens kind of deal, as far as Frøy in Sweden kind of deal. Seeing that, it was said that Frøy sired the Ynglings, the line of kings that later gave birth to Harald Fairhair, and go over to Norway. And I think they were Swedish originally. Anyway, the gist of all of that being that because of that tie, it was seen that Frøy was tied more closely with this family. Similarly with Odin and the Volsungs, because Odin is said to have sired the Volsung line. Those are very specific, and those are more like demigod stories than they are patron deity stories, because you're talking about specific lineal, familial lines tied to the gods and goddesses. So anyway, I'm rambling a lot on this one, guys. I know I am, but that's because the concept of patron deities is one that gets me on weird tangents pretty fast. All of it boils down to, I'm not a huge fan of the concept of patron deities because I feel like it's used out of context. Romanesque concept through a Wiccan veneer, applied to a probably incomplete and rudimentary understanding of heathenry to begin with. So it's like being in an advanced level of something, and then somebody coming up and asking you not only a rudimentary question, but like a rudimentary question that has nothing to do with the actual core of what it is your hobby is. It's like somebody who comes up and knows you do remote control airplanes, and then wants to talk to you about this. They have a misunderstanding about what it is you do, and instead of understanding it, they ask you something that's thematically right. It's about planes, but it has nothing to do with RC planes. It's like hang gliders or something like that. And you're like, not really the same thing. So I don't really have an opinion because I don't know how to answer the question because it doesn't contextually make sense. Which is why it's so hard for me to come up with an example, is because it doesn't contextually make sense. And so it's kind of frustrating. That's where I come with the whole patron deity thing, is it doesn't contextually make sense to me. As far as a patron, because in the truth of a patron deity, like the Romans had patron deities, that's not how I see heathenry working, at least not right now. And not outside of specific family lines like the Volsungs or the Ynglings. I just don't see that playing out that way. They're more tied to class and role and function, and we call on the different gods at different times to do different things, and I would be afraid of over-focusing on one and alienating the others as a result, just out of simple respect. So, yeah, long, rambly, and really weird, but that's kind of my take on patron deities and why I don't jump in those conversations frequently. I know a lot of you are going to have varying opinions and you're going to disagree with me on this one. That's cool. I get it. It's fine. You have your relationships and you may see the gods differently than how I see the gods. I get that. But just, this is what I function from. So I can't necessarily change that just because somebody throws up a conflicting comment on YouTube. So that being said, we're going to wrap this one up, guys. This is obviously one of my more rambly episodes. I'm going to try to my next one to be a little bit more on point. But in the meantime, thank you guys. Appreciate everything. Hail to you all. May your ancestors smile on you.